appreciate your time tonight. I look forward to discussing or answering questions, and my contact information is on there as well. Gentlemen, tonight I was asked to talk about ways that you can help protect yourself as tenants, ways that you can navigate the leasing world, the real estate world. There could be a 2-day presentation on real estate management, but tonight I'm not going to focus on any management of Greek houses. It's going to be purely key practices, tips for you on how to understand the lease that you're signing, how to navigate issues or disputes, and have a better knowledge and understanding of leasing. So, for instance, some of the questions we'll answer is, are you knowledgeable about your rights as a renter? Are you aware of some common sense practices that you could do that will help you to be successful? Some of the goals I have for the webinar tonight is to understand leases and the law, knowing your rights and how to protect yourself and or your chapter and colony, and learning key practices to apply going forward. So why does this matter? You know, everyone starts their presentations off talking about, you know, all the different goals for the webinar, et cetera. You could save yourself a lot of time and money by focusing on just implementing some common sense things that I have learned by working with undergraduates and leasing to them over the last 3 years. My goal tonight is to empower you, since this, for many, a lease is the first contract you are signing as a legal adult. You need to have a basic understanding of what this means when you sign those leases and enter into a contract as an adult. There are lifelong ramifications that can greatly affect you. So why does this matter? I work with undergraduates exclusively in the real estate market. I understand some of the shortcomings, some of the experiences, the lack of experience in understanding what you are signing. I have to answer questions all the time. But here are some national statistics for you. Over half of all students rent from a private landlord. And you often have to contend with rental issues that impede your ability to acquire a sound education. This information is tracked. As you know, you sign a housing contract with your universities for the dormitories. They have industry standards and they track statistics as well. Critical housing issues that students have to contend with, as reported by the NMHC, are things that we all are aware of. Every one of these issues can greatly affect your ability to study, have a positive experience, sleep so you can wake up to make it to your job, or can cost you money if your landlord's not fixing things or you're being held responsible. The other reason this is very important is our undergraduate students, young men between 18 and 22, are some of the most vulnerable renters in our country. Did you know that 32,000 plus college students are homeless? This is at the end of 2019. They didn't do the study last year that I'm aware of, and you can Google to read more in depth. But there are over 32,000 undergraduates who are homeless attending college, and almost 9% are at risk of homelessness. Almost 25% income they earn is considered below the poverty level. So as you can imagine, signing a lease while you're trying to study, trying to pay for school, trying to pay for rent, you could be taken advantage of, and it happens. This is basically the slide that shows the breakdown. For those over 50,000, their parents are usually included. So if you only take away one thing from this webinar, and I'm sure if you're watching it, it's been recorded, a lease, its language, and everything spelled out in the lease is legally binding. Once you sign, both parties have agreed to its terms. There are no exceptions. You can't just walk away. You can't just say, nope, sorry. Once you have signed that contract, you have agreed to those terms. The only exception would be if the landlord has put some kind of language in the lease that's contrary to the law, like discrimination. I'm going to tell you right now, almost all landlords worth their salt have spent a couple $100 to have a lawyer help them write their lease. So we'll get into some steps you can take when you're reviewing the lease, but be careful, because when you sign that lease, you are agreeing to the terms in the lease. And I'm going to explain later how there's not a whole lot of ways out of meeting your obligations. Just to give you some knowledge on contract law, to be enforceable, a contract must meet certain legal criteria. There must be an offer, an acceptance, and a consideration. Specifically for leases, they should contain at a minimum 5 essential components. This is written in the law. It's specific: who the parties are, a description of the premises being leased, and how long the arrangement will last, what the tenant will pay, and signatures. If you are ever presented a lease that does not have any of those or is missing one of those, you need to pause immediately before you continue on and address it. Could be simple error, could be a typo, but those are the 5 essential components that need to be in the lease. Those are the 5 main terms that you will have to be obligated to: the dates that you get access and when you have to leave, how much you'll have to pay and when, and that you've signed and agreed to it. And they need to sign it as well, and you need to be given a copy. So when Alex first asked me, I was trying to think of ways that we could boil down a very complex world, rife with legalese, laws, a million different types of scenarios, a million different kinds of issues that could arise. And for the sake of time and for the benefit to get the most out of the 20 minutes or so here with me, I came up with some key practices. You're going to say they're common sense. My experience says most do not follow these. My real world experience, both in the private investments I have and since I've started working for Barrister, is most tenants or individuals in general do not do these. So there's a flyer that will be available to you that will have all these spelled out, but I am calling these key practices. Practice means things that you will apply and continue to do for the rest of your life. You will put these key practices into practice. So that's the reason why I chose that term. And the first one we have here is read the lease. I cannot tell you how many co-signers, parents, who will call me and ask why they owe rent on a lease they have signed. Read your lease. Sometimes, currently there's a huge demand for apartments. In a few years, the birthing rates are going to hit and enrollments will drop. And maybe you won't have to compete for that luxury apartment you want your junior or senior year. Right now, though, you're pressured to sign and sign as soon as possible so you get your pick of the apartments. It's a tactic. They've created the time constraint, and it's becoming more and more ridiculous. For instance, in Milwaukee, Marquette students are pressured second week of school. How do you know if you're even going to still be in school? What if you sign up for study abroad next year? But there's a limitation on how many off-campus apartments there are right by campus, and they know that. So you're there in the office with your 5 friends or your buddies that you're going to share this apartment with. Don't feel pressured to sign until you have read the lease. It doesn't take long, 10 to 15 minutes. Step off to the side, call your parents, call a guardian, a mentor, a family member. Maybe you have someone else in real estate. Hey, this doesn't sound right in the lease. What am I agreeing to? Key practice number 1, read the lease. Now, when you read the lease, 75% of it's going to be a bunch of legalese, a bunch of lawyer written statements and things that you're not going to understand. That's okay. A lot of those are standard practice. If you go to the next landlord, they're going to be in their lease as well. What I want you to learn tonight, and when you watch this webinar, is when I say read the lease, you need to know the key terms of the lease. And I've listed them here for you. Pretty self-explanatory, but a lot of times I get calls asking for this information on a lease that someone has signed. Know the dates. Can you move in a week early? Yes or no? Is that an option? Don't show up a week early and expect to move in. Know your dates, know the payments, know the penalties, understand the security deposit. Most places require you to pay your security deposit when you sign. Did your friends tell you that when you went to the leasing office? Okay. Fines. What are going to be the fines if you have a noise complaint, if the police show up and call the landlord? What are going to be the fines for excessive cleaning? And also, and more importantly, expectations. This one's tricky because a lot of folks are tired of reading on page 3, and expectations are always spelled out in the lease. What is allowed and not allowed while you are a tenant? Some things are not always black and white, though. There could be some expectations that are just in the lease so that they are in there. For instance, bed bug clauses. The house is infested free, it has to by law. They can't rent to you if it's infested. But if you bring in that free futon on the curb into the house, you violated an expectation in the lease, and you will have to pay to remedy the bed bugs. That happened at a house I managed. Other one, and the biggest one, is no pets. If there's an expectation in there that you are not allowed to have pets, do not show up with the pet. You could be on time with your lease. Could be a perfect tenant, super clean, super, just a wonderful tenant. If you bring an animal in and the lease had an expectation that there are no pets allowed, you're in breach of contract and can be evicted for that. You have violated an expectation or an obligation in the lease. So that was just some things I want to point out, that not only do you need to know when to pay and how, et cetera, and the dates, you need to make sure you understand the expectations that you have. And some of the large, tall, new luxury apartment buildings with the clubhouses, the pools, their expectations are immense because they're going to have a whole list for the clubhouse, a whole list for the pool area, a whole list for the weight room. Make sure you read those because you could be evicted or violate your lease simply by not following expectations. I'd like to point out a few of the legal things you'll see so you have a basic understanding of what they are. One thing I will tell you is leases are written to protect the investment by the owner, the landlord, and/or the property management company that is managing it on behalf of the owner and landlord. You typically, unless you have market forces behind you where they are desperate to sign, asking for things to be removed from the lease before you sign is perfectly reasonable. And I have that a lot. But just understand the landlord more than likely will not entertain your edits because they don't have to. There's someone waiting right behind you to rent the place. So when you're reading the lease, there'll be a few things that are important for you to know that can impact you. Some clauses, the exculpatory clause, that basically limits the liability of the landlord and owner. It's a portion of the lease that will absolve a landlord of liability for harm suffered by a tenant under certain circumstances, if the use of the space is solely within your control. As many of us know, in college towns, there's always those few landlords that have all the houses and they don't fix them up. And as we know, a lot of young men and women will rent these houses because they plan on partying in them or don't want to have to take care of them. So what if it has bad wiring? You're going to learn in a minute that that's an expectation under the law that you have a safe and habitable home. But if you shock yourself or it was within your control, with this clause in the lease, there are limitations to your claims that you can make for the harm that has been caused to you. Now, I'd like to say in this webinar, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not providing legal advice. I'm just giving you a general knowledge. Every circumstance, as is with all real estate, if you are in serious harm has been done to you, you need to seek legal help. Okay. But anyways, exculpatory clause basically limits the liability of the landlord even for things that maybe He should have fixed, I don't know. There's a million different scenarios there. A new one, and this is important for you guys to know because it's recent, force majeure clauses. These are commonplace in commercial leases, and you will now see them in every single lease, I guarantee, in multifamily, single family rentals. It was not before the pandemic, but they're going to be in there now. The definition of force majeure basically means this clause is triggered by an exceptional or unforeseen circumstance beyond the control of the parties. So everyone who has signed the lease. It basically absolves the landlord, but not you. Well, that doesn't seem fair, does it? So for an example, payment of rent will not be excused in the event of restrictive governmental laws or regulations. What about acts of God? Is that the landlord's fault? Did the landlord pass the laws? He still owes his mortgage, property taxes. Force majeure clause, you will see it. You can ask for it to be removed. They will not. But just understand though, you still have recourse, but I want you to have a basic understanding that these are in there. Don't be alarmed, standard practice. But that's basically what those are in the lease, okay? You'll see things like utility clauses, fixture clauses. Those are pretty standard, straightforward. Means, for instance, it could just simply mean you pay for the utilities. You're responsible for water to being paid and provided to the house. The laws on that vary greatly by state and local. So make sure you understand that what he's asking you to do in regards to water and heat, electricity, that a quick Google search, he's in line. Fixtures clauses, if he's provided furniture, make sure that furniture is clean and good working order. I'm going to tell you, if you are renting an off-campus house from a private landlord, unless it's a big apartment building or in one of our fraternity houses, and they are providing you furniture, feel free to check it out and ask them to remove it and provide your own. Rarely is a couch ever in the same condition at move out as it was at move in. And they can use that to keep your security deposit. So we'll get into move in and move out shortly, but make sure fixtures clauses, you read those and you understand your expectations with whatever they are providing you to use. Indemnification basically means the landlord will not be held liable for any damage or injury. That is a very watered down definition of that. If you were to hire an attorney, they would tell you don't sign a lease that has it in there. And I'm going to tell you every lease has it in there. Again, not trying to be doom and gloom. I just want to expose you to some of these weird legal nuances that you're going to read in the lease because I'm asking you to read it. You still have recourse, but just know if you see those, you don't need to run away. But it's okay to question or maybe even ask if they're removing. Okay. Sublease, pretty straightforward, guys. Again, with the sublease, make sure you understand your expectations. I cannot tell you, I just had it last year. Someone finds their buddy to take over the lease, they move him in. I don't know about it. He doesn't pay. Guess who's responsible? So every landlord's going to have some type of sublease protocol, procedure they want you to follow. Unless you have it in writing from the landlord that your lease has ended and the new person has signed, it's not complete. So make sure you read the sublease specifics. They may have certain dates before you can be let out. For instance, I have seen this. You have to pay 50% of the lease before it can be subleased out. So if you're in the third month of the semester and you need to get out of your lease because you have family issues back home or school is not for you, you're still going to owe rent through December, even though you found someone here in October. So again, one of those things, read the lease. All right. Kind of a dry topic, but I want to talk about two types of leases that you are typically exposed to. So master leases and there's individual leases. The master lease is commonly used when chapters want to get the house off campus and the landlord just wants one check. Or he wants to make everyone liable for that lease. Here's the pitfalls, guys. There's nothing wrong with master leases, but you cannot sign a master lease as a chapter. XYZ chapter Delta Chi can't sign a master lease as XYZ chapter Delta Chi. The individuals paying rent and living in the house must be the signatories on the lease. My recommendation to you, if you are interested in doing a master lease, your housing corps and alumni group need to be involved. And normally, and this is very standard, Barrister does this, we sign master leases on behalf of the chapter, and then the individuals sign leases with the housing corps, etc. Master leases are a great way, a great tool for a chapter to get started building those funds towards a house. It's the number one way Barrister does it for our chapters. No one has the capital just to go out and buy houses, especially like you start somewhere, and you can find a nice home where your alumni group signing a master lease, providing that landlord one check, and you renting it from the housing corps, and then be able to put some money away to start working towards it. There's nothing wrong with master leases, but if you want the house as an individual, so let's say there's a house that holds 8 guys, and you and your 8 buddies want to rent this house, and the landlord's saying, I need a master lease. Make sure you talk to someone first, because whoever's signing or could be the first signature can cause some issues. So be careful with being enticed to jump into a master lease as a chapter. All right. And we'll get more on that here in a second. So this brings me to my second key practice. Never be the sole signature on behalf of others. That seems like common sense, because who wants to be responsible for your buddies? I will tell you, happens all the time. And right now, if you're watching this and you have signed a lease because your buddies talked you into it or they didn't want to sign, so they're living in paying rent, but you're the name on the signature, you need to do a roommate agreement. And I'll talk about that in just a second. Key practice number 2, never be the sole signature on behalf of others, because whoever signs the lease is the responsible party. It will not matter that he's your best friend from high school and you went to college together and he was a great person until 6 months ago, and all of a sudden he's starting to make bad life choices, damaging the house, parties all night. I had one instance where furniture was lit on fire, and the person that signed the lease had to replace it. Had a falling out with this friend that he thought would have his best interests in mind, and it didn't work. So when you sign a lease, you are responsible party. So if you're on a master lease, everyone living in that house needs to be on that lease. No one should be allowed to live in that house unless they have signed the same lease you have signed. They have the same skin in the game and the same level of responsibility you do for the upkeep of that house and whatever the terms are for payment, etc. If you're listening to this and you find yourself, like I just alluded to, being the sole guy responsible for everyone else, you need to have them sign a roommate agreement with you. The roommate agreements can look similar to this. I stole this off the internet. I gave it to Jason. He's going to give it to you as an template for you to download and use. The roommate agreement then protects you to the best that you can, because you now are responsible for them. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's kind of like a watered down lease. Just basically spells out, hey, you need to pay because I'm not paying for you, et cetera, et cetera. So I found this, I like this one online. It pretty much can be molded to whatever your needs are. But it will be available to you. If you are in a sticky situation, a master lease, please call me. I'm willing to help you out. We do this all the time. if there's an interest in a house that maybe you could master lease, give me a call. I'd much rather have a seat at the table or involve your alumni group than you as a chapter or you as a dedicated group within the chapter to go out and start signing master leases. And get yourself in a pickle. All right. Moving on, individual leases. This is the most common, the one you guys are all well aware. Individual lease just simply means so same scenario, house with 8 guys, all 8 have an individual lease with the landlord. So the landlord has signed a lease with all 8, with each of them, and is equally responsible. Now, I just want to point out in individual leases, there might be a key term to know: jointly and several liability. You can Google to read more on it, but as you can see on the slide, it simply means, in law, joint and several liability makes all parties in a suit responsible for damages up to the entire amount awarded. So just because you're in an individual lease and you're sharing this house with 8 of your buddies and you're living up to the standards, you're not damaging anything you're paying, you could still be responsible for their non-payment. I'll give you an example. Your friend hits hard times in November, lease runs through May, he just leaves, disappears, and he's not paying his rent. I can say with some confidence, you will not be evicted if you are paying your lease and meeting your obligations on your individual lease. Even though this term could be in your lease, which means you are or can be held liable to pay what he's not paying, just make sure you meet your terms. What will probably happen at move out, and again, nothing's ever black and white, he'll use your security deposit first to try to pay down whatever debt's owed collectively. So if you're expecting, your house is, your room's spotless, you haven't damaged anything, you're wanting that security deposit back, but yet one of your fellow friends who was in an individual lease but didn't meet his obligation, the landlord is justified with this term in there to withhold your security deposit to pay the debt owed. He doesn't have to he can just do it because jointly and severally liable. So basically that is, if one party is unable to pay, the others named must pay more than their share. So it gives them the ability to make you pay more than what you originally agreed to. All right. So again, signing individual leases, we're reading the lease. We're never being the sole signature on a lease. And there's just some terms and things to know. Got ahead of myself, didn't I? So key practice 1 and 2, read the lease, never be the sole signature on behalf of others. Seeing as we don't have a whole lot of members, so feel free to reach out and send your questions. Alex, did anyone send any questions in prior?
Yes. So earlier you talked about the issues sometimes with landlords and maintenance and care of a facility. Going a little bit further, what advice do you have for folks who feel if they are living in a currently unsafe environment that their landlord isn't addressing? What steps would you recommend they take first?
So I'm actually going to get into that specifically when I get into how to manage with the landlord, but you need to communicate the issues you are having in writing, and you need to do so the first instance that you discover these issues. It needs to be in a way that's trackable, and you need to do so in a nice way. I'm going to get into depth in that and how that benefits you. But if you're having issues with your landlord and there are things developing in the house that are creating an unsafe condition, you need to first notify them. Don't escalate it to lawyers or anything else. First, be a human being, interpersonal, work with your landlord to see if they will remedy it. If you're having issues, I will go into in depth here in a minute on what you should do, the next steps. And there's some real important do not do when you are trying to advocate for yourself or their issues arise that will help set you up for success later. So before I go any further about how to navigate the relationship with your landlord and what your rights are, I want to be a Debbie Downer for a minute and talk about what happens if you don't meet your lease obligations. And I promise, once I get through this depressing part of the presentation, I'll get to what your rights are, define those for you, give you some really concrete things to use to really navigate and have a great, successful relationship. But I will tell you, a lot of folks don't meet their obligations. Does that mean everyone gets evicted? No. In fact, I tried to find the source. It's estimated less than 1% of leases ever result in eviction. And you would think it'd be higher. Most landlords will work with you. They'll figure something out. Before I go through this, keep this in mind. It is in the interest of the owner and landlord to not involve an attorney and go to court either. It's also in your interest. But no, anyone who owns and manages real estate, and there are quite a many of our alumni, and hopefully you will do someday, law, legal, dealing with attorneys is part of it. They will not be intimidated by your threats of a lawsuit. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So let me get through what happens when you don't meet your lease obligations, because I know this for a fact. Most don't understand the process. They don't understand when you speak with them. So it's very important you know what goes on when you don't meet it. So making sense of eviction and judgments, there are things called curable notices or demand for rent and possession. And please understand this. If you have a judgment against you, it will follow you the rest of your life until it is remedied. All right? Please understand that. You can't escape a judgment. You can hide with the judgment in hand, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. It will follow you forever. So it's in your interest, right? It's in your interest to work with your landlord, figure it out, be open and honest, work with your landlord. They were a 19 to 22-year-old undergraduate at some point as well. They get it. How you communicate and how you conduct yourself, more so than any other way, can impact where this heads with great repercussions to you in your life. Okay. So again, continuing on with the depressing part of this presentation, this is what a demand for rent possession or a curable notice can look like. They essentially do the same thing. If you ever receive one of these, you're in trouble. And you need to take this as seriously as possible. If you show up and one of these is taped to your door, has been mailed to you certified or emailed with read receipt, although most laws an email wouldn't pass as so mail and posting. Whatever's going on in your life almost becomes secondary to figuring out how you respond to it. Because if this is being sent to you, the landlord has gotten to the point where he feels he has to start the legal process against you to A, get paid, or B, remove you from his property. And there are specific things they have to follow in order to get those things done. This means he's calculated that he's willing to spend money on an attorney or commit himself to enforcing the lease in any way possible to make sure that you meet your obligations in the lease. So again, if you ever receive a curable notice or demand for rent possession, speak to your guardian, your mentor, your parents, or the free legal help at your school, or you probably know why you're getting it. All right. So one thing I want to stress to you, and I guess I have here my notes to go through this. You can't ignore your obligations. I get it. You're struggling. School's hard. School's expensive. Rent is expensive. But you've signed a lease. In the eyes of the law, you're an adult. You will be treated as such. Your co-signers will be treated as such. There is no way around that. There's no charm. Maybe the charm worked in high school. Maybe the pleas worked before. I'm here to tell you, if you're receiving the curable notice and it's to that point, you need to figure out a solution to why you haven't met your obligations and present that to your landlord. To get off script a little bit here, majority of landlords aren't evil people. They're just businessmen, or this is their life savings put into this, or this is a way for them to offset their retirement. They've worked hard to get these rental properties. They don't want to kick you to the street. They don't want to go to the courts. They've probably been calling you, emailing you, sending you nice letters, getting stronger in tone, saying, hey, are you going to pay? How are you going to pay? Before they ever get to this point of demanding you pay up or get out. So what do you do if you're falling behind on your obligations? I'm going to talk about our next key practices, but most from this point on deals with how you interact. And as a young man, as an upstanding young man, because we made you a Delta Chi, you need to call, or you need to submit in writing to the landlord or owner, property management company, what your solution is to get caught up. This is not unusual. The demand for rent possession is saying, well, in this case, this person's $12,000 behind in rent, probably didn't pay all year, which means the landlord probably let them live in the house for 12 months without paying before he finally felt forced to start the legal process, because if he doesn't do this, he doesn't get paid. So at this point on the left, that example, that young person has really messed up, and his solution at this point probably isn't going to work. The guy on the right, it might just be he had hard times. So can you do a payment plan? Can you offer up, I will pay on time the rest of my lease, and I'll give you an additional 200 every 2 weeks. I get paid every 2 weeks on Friday. I can give you 70% of my paycheck to get caught up. Here's my dates, here's my terms. Is this amenable to you? If it seems within reason and you've been a nice tenant and maybe you just are in hard times, they might agree to it. And then you avoid all this. But the second you give a solution, you have to be able to live up to that solution if he agrees to it, because he will not give you a second chance. All right. If you know you can't pay this at all and you're going to have to be evicted, you need to find some legal help, or you need to communicate that you can't and leave peacefully. Or work with him to figure out, I will move out. Can I get on a payment plan for the next 12 months slowly to pay you back? Again, you're trying to avoid a judgment. Here's what happens when you get a judgment against you. And I'll give you a real example that happened. If this young man, and this wasn't a barrister property, this isn't a Delta Chi, but this is a real story. Young man owed $1,100 and just hit hard times. His landlord offered him, can you pay $800? We'll call it even. You move out, move on, and we don't have to go through all this. The young man had attitude. He was probably depressed. I mean, he was struggling. We've all been there, myself included. So instead of working with the landlord, speaking to the landlord, he bolted. So the landlord, who offered him a fairly reasonable way out, now is stuck not getting anything, has no communication from this young man. So he starts this process. The young man initially responds, but then doesn't show up for court. A judgment is rendered against him for that $1,100 that he owes. This young man's had a choice then. He could have gone in front of the judge and said, I can pay $200 for the next 12 months, et cetera. Is this amenable? Let's mediate, et cetera. Instead, he let a judgment be rendered and put on the record in court which basically means now this landlord has stronger tools to use in his collection efforts and can also charge you interest. Judges don't have a whole lot of leeway if you ever go to court. You will guarantee you will have to pay the rental amounts in the lease. They can waive the late fees. They don't have to make you pay the landlord's legal fees, but you're going to owe the rental amount you agreed to. So this young man disappears. He's going through something. He has a judgment rendered to him. The clock starts ticking on the interest that he owes. So this 1,100 slowly turns into, I think he owed about $800 in legal fees. So now he's up to 1,900. Now interest is being charged on the 1,900. He found the young man. So basically 4 years later, he found the young man on Instagram, paid for a skip trace, paid a private investigator to find him, and the guy ended up owing him $9,000, thereabouts. All right, so you understand why it's important that you engage, be respectful, and take it serious. All right, moving on. So leases are written to protect the landlord investment. So what are your rights? Most of your rights, basically these four in the federal law: anti-discrimination, a right to a habitable home, and a right to privacy and security deposit limits. The Fair Housing Act defines anti-discrimination by race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, handicap, or disability. I'm going to let you know right now, it is a patchwork for sexual orientation or gender identity issues. There are not protections in the law. I would not assume there are. If you feel you are being discriminated against, every county and state has offices available, and schools especially, to reach out for you, to be an outreach to help you. So if you feel like you're being discriminated by things that aren't in the federal law, your state may very well have protections, or your local municipal government. You will have to do a little legwork to discover if they do, and there are organizations there to help you. You have a right to a habitable home, free from unsafe conditions like bad wiring, no running water, holes in the roof installation. Landlords have a duty to repair and make sure it is habitable. I'm going to let you know that duty of repairs and maintenance is very broad and hard to enforce. It's very subjective. So if you are going after your landlord in dispute because he's not repairing things, there's a lot of documentation. You need to have some outside help to help you follow it. All right. You have a right to privacy and security. That basically means entry into your personal space, background checks being run on you. And there's also some safe housing acts. If your roommate is a violent threat to you, you can prove that. You can also have them removed, or you can be let out of your lease. Every state has that defined to some degree. There are also security deposit limits. This is one of the few things that is always spelled out in your local law, and it varies greatly by state again. It usually consists of some type of limitation on how much they can charge for a security deposit, and there's always a time limit on how quickly they have to return it to you or justify keeping it. So those are the basic four rights you have. And then what else is in the lease? So what now? How do you ensure you have the best possible outcome to your situation? How do you ensure your experience is the best it can be? We're going to learn a few more key practices. Always communicate in writing. Communicate with respect and poise, no matter what. Sounds like common sense, right? This one's hard. Most can do it very well. I'm going to let you know, if you are asking something of the landlord or you're discussing something about the lease, you need to always put things in writing. Writing can be an email, a text, or through your tenant app. Almost all landlords now, Cozy, Buildium, RealPage, there's pretty much every tenant now has an app where they can log in and submit a work order, communicate. It creates a record. But you need to have a written record, and you need to always communicate in writing. And you need to always do so with respect. No matter what, you could be renting from the biggest jerk on the face of the earth. He could be just an awful human being. You take the high road, because if the dispute ever goes further or he tries to push it, you could show that, listen, I was trying to be respectful. I spelled out my concerns. I did so in writing here on this date and this time. Here you go. Read what I requested. Here's the second week I asked for this to be repaired. Here's pictures of my stuff. Here's why I said, hey, the pipe still burst. The basement's full of water. It's coming to the first floor. And he did nothing. Okay. Nothing. You can't immediately get, if you have a negligent landlord or owner or manager, the tools you have to remedy the situation will never occur quickly. So it's up to you to communicate your concerns and needs in writing with poise and respect and consistency. All right. So here's some tips to remember about communication for key practices 3 and 4. Do not threaten legal action. What does that mean? Happens all the time. Every week I get a text. Oh, I don't know what it is, why folks do that, but for some reason it makes them feel stronger, I guess, when they're venting. Landlords, people in real estate, they have savings put away specifically because they know they're going to have some attorney fees. They have lawsuits going all the time. The legal threat does not help you. All right. Now, a letter from an attorney that you have hired, that's different. When you are communicating in key practice 3 and 4 with that poise and respect, do not threaten legal action. It won't faze them. If anything, it'll shut them down, because now they have someone who's threatened to sue them. They're going to be guarded. They're going to be leery of what's your intentions, etc. You are light years ahead to always be respectful, communicate, try to use some emotional intelligence. Maybe this landlord is a busy professional with family. Maybe he sent you an email on Monday saying, I will send this to you on Tuesday or have someone out, and he ghosts you. Maybe it's just an honest mistake. He got busy. Kid got sick that afternoon. He had to go get his child from school. Follow up nicely. I'm just checking in. You said on Tuesday you'd send this to me. You don't have to, kiss up, but just be nice. And then maybe it'll be fixed. 9 times out of 10, you're dealing with another human being like yourself. Learn how to navigate that, work with the landlord, and always communicate in writing and with poise and respect. How do you like to be treated? Do you like being yelled at? Does that motivate you to help a person? It's no different for the landlord. Even if the landlord is in the wrong or is being negligent, they're going to be more likely to help you or come to your aid if you are a very kind, respectful. I'll tell you, I have parents call and scream at me for the weirdest things. And then they get my side of the story and they understand, oh, okay. So I don't really want to help people who scream at me, just like you don't either. I will bend over backwards for someone who is very sweet and sincere, and I know is doing their best. You'd be amazed how far that goes, guys. All right. All right, I've gone over this, haven't I? Due to sake of time, sorry, I'm very long-winded. I won't get into all these scenarios. I kind of just did. But back to the question that Alex gave me about what do you do if the landlord's not responding? Guys, the cards are kind of stacked against you in some ways. The lease has language in that protects them. They understand the environment in which you're living, and et cetera. Follow my key practices here. I'm not saying these practices will solve your problems, guaranteed. But you will have a better chance of being successful if you document, put things in writing, respect and communicate Read your lease and understand what your obligations are and meet your obligations. All right. If the landlord continues not to fix something, you cannot just withhold your rent. So here's another thing that I know about. If it gets to the point where they're not doing anything and it's very dire, you need to seek safety in numbers. If there's free legal help at your school, you need to go to them. If you have co-signers or parents, mentors, or family members, seek their help. Your alumni, ABT, someone's here to help you. All right. You will help yourself out by following the practices, but it may turn into a dispute. Never withhold rent, because even though you are in the right, you are not meeting your obligations. So, scenario, it's bad. You should not be giving any money to this guy. You get an attorney, you spend a couple $100 to get advice, or the school, they agree. One way they will have you do it is you pay the money into escrow instead of paying the landlord, but you're still paying. Even though he's not getting it, you're still paying. You're setting yourself up for if the dispute continues or this escalates, you can be successful. You are showing good faith and you are meeting your obligations. The landlord is not. I'm here to tell you, like for instance, right now, courts are so backed up, it could be a couple of years before you even get a day in court. So unfortunately, the real world can be cruel sometimes, where you could be in a pickle. Vet your landlords before you rent from them. If they're the slumlord, don't rent from them. You're going to have the same experience the other folks have had. And they get away with it because they know you're not going to spend thousands of dollars spending 2 years in courts to go after the $500 or whatever. Now, you can even take the worst landlord in the world, be nice, be cordial, document, and meet your obligations and be successful. All right. So I've kind of already talked about this. The last two are kind of just general practices, but they're very important. Number 5, if you haven't figured that out by now, I hope you have. You need to meet your obligation no matter what. You signed a lease, it's a contract. Like I said in the beginning, you will have to meet those obligations. Number 6, most landlords, pretty much all of them, will have some kind of way for you to document move in and move out. You have absolute freedom to take that to the next level. Video if you want, take pictures, annotate, document move in and move out condition. Okay. If you're concerned about your security deposit or being liable, because even though they could have damage that more than your security deposit covers. All right. So make sure you document. Again, same thing, put in the communication writing. Lastly, get renter's insurance. Every one of our undergraduates should have renter's insurance. I don't know what the price range is currently. I know it used to be between $5 and $15 a month. You can, if you're curious how to get renter's insurance, all insurance folks can sell it, but more than likely you can get it for dirt cheap on your parents, guardians, or family members' homeowners policy. Renter's insurance will protect you if your items are stolen, or if your items are damaged from the house, or if someone's injured. You'd be amazed at how much renter's insurance can help and protect you. It is something you should have, even if you're renting from your ABT and housing corps, because maybe the roof blows off and all your $2,000 computer gets water damaged, gaming computer, right? It can be replaced with no extra cost. All right, get renter's insurance. Since there's not a whole lot of back and forth, I'm going to continue for sake of time. I'm reaching that hour mark. I appreciate your attention. I'm very passionate about getting you this knowledge to empower you. I hope that's coming through in this webinar. There are 3 things that I commonly have experienced. I want to go over real quick, briefly. Pets and emotional support animals. I want to dispel this myth that in the eyes of the law, guys, an emotional support animal is a pet. It's not under ADA. The emotional support animal, as it stands right now, is not the same as a seeing eye dog. If you have epilepsy, someone to help you with that. There's very many other, most of those other animals, support animals, thousands of dollars and many hours have been spent to train those animals. That's why they're allowed, they're protected under handicap disability. Your emotional support animal your handwritten note from a psychologist therapist does not justify bringing a pet into the house if there's a no pets policy. Have we allowed emotional support animals? Yes. Again, go home for Christmas, life's hitting you hard. Don't just show up with it. In writing, ask for a variance to the terms from your landlord. Hey, I have this 10-pound dog. I was given to me for Christmas, blah, blah, blah. And you'd be amazed, maybe they will. But please understand this, especially in a rooming house, your fellow tenants have the right to peaceful and private enjoyment of their property, their home as well. They're in a lease. They don't need to listen to a barking dog. Okay. A trained support animal will not be barking all night, tearing up things. They are trained. Your emotional support animal is a pet. Don't push it. You will not win that. Okay. Every year in January, I have undergraduates show up with dogs and then they get the handwritten note and the $10 rest off Amazon and claim they have rights. I can't do anything about it. I'm letting you know right now, the courts have ruled in the favor of landlords as it stands right now. Okay. Threatening lawsuits, we already talked about that. And I also talked about how landlords are human beings. They do care. This is a business for them. Hopefully, as you know, with some businesses, some are run better than others. How you interact with them, like most things in life, like with your professors, with your alumni, with each other, can greatly dictate your experience renting as an undergraduate in a college town many miles away from home. Okay. Landlords do care. Start with that in mind when you start reaching out to them. Quick review of all these key practices. Read the lease. Never be the sole signature on behalf of others. Always communicate in writing and do so with respect to employees. Meet your obligation, and then document move in and move out and get renter's insurance. I tried to boil it down to 7. I think if you follow these 7 things as a young man between 18 and 22, you're going to have the best chance for success. Alex, are there any other questions I should answer before we wrap up?
Yeah, just one quick question that I think it would be a great wrap up to tonight's program. What are some of the ways that Barrister can provide support and help, even if a chapter or colony members currently don't have a house? What are some of the ways that they can utilize you and the Barrister team as a resource?
Great question. Thanks, Alex. The Barrister was created based on what other fraternities in our industry do. We are here to serve you. We are here to support you. We are blindly focused on your housing needs. That being said, every scenario is different for every chapter. For instance, we had one chapter who really wanted a house but didn't have the membership to fill it. So reach out to us. We are here as a resource, not just to buy you houses, not just to get you houses. Although that's what we are trying to do, is to build better housing environments for our chapters. We're here to support you as well. Are you in a master lease that's not a good situation? We can advise and help with that as well. If you want a house or want to look at a house, we believe partnering with you and your alumni can help make that experience the best it can be. Don't run off and sign master leases with private landlords off campus. Have someone else at the table with you that can help you and protect you. It's one of the reasons we were created. All right, we're not just here to buy houses. We're here to manage houses for you, for alumni groups. We're here to support our undergraduates and our fraternity as a whole. I always like to give a little bit of heart at the end. I kind of wrote this up. Maybe it's too much for a slide. Guys, you have an amazing headquarters that's been day in, day out creating resources for you to support you solely so you can have the best experience possible. You joined a fraternity. You have now a network at age 18, 19, 20, whatever, getting ready to graduate, of brothers who care and are willing to help. I remember when I was an undergraduate, I was pretty salty, where I live, we didn't have a whole lot of alumni nearby. One thing I realized quickly when I became a consultant, everybody wants to see you be successful. It's why I'm spending my evening here doing this webinar. Alex, we're doing this for your benefit. I encourage you to take advantage of your membership at Delta Chi, utilize the mentorship programs, reach out to Barrister if you have housing questions, concerns, needs, figure out ways we can help, your headquarters for other things. But also remember this, all alumni want to help you. They just need to be asked. And that seems to be really hard. Just ask for help. You'd be amazed if you feel like who will step up and help you. Okay, that's my parting thought. Not really housing related. I want to really thank Alex for giving me this opportunity. I hope the content is beneficial to you. And I'll go back to the main page here. You can see there's my email. You can find this Barrister Capital on the headquarters website.
Great. Huge thank you to everybody who was able to join us live, and for those that will be watching this recording at a later time. Again, as Eric mentioned, we did pass along a few of the additional resources that he's created that can be a great help to you as you navigate the housing search. Always be mindful. Be sure to check out the Delta Chi Digest or our social media pages for some of our upcoming educational and developmental opportunities, including our next webinar on November 10th, Financial Foundations, where alumnus Dave Edwards is going to be sharing his insights and expertise in helping develop your finances for success. But a huge, again, I want to take time to recognize and thank Eric for putting together this fantastic program. He is a great resource for anyone who is navigating the housing search. If your chapter colony has questions about housing, about some of the larger goals long-term, ways that they can support your alumni in starting a housing corporation, whatever it might be, Eric and the Barrister team are a great resource that are always available to answer your questions. So again, thank you to Eric. Thank you to all of you who are participating in tonight's program, and for each and every one of you who is out there living our Delta Chi values. A friendly reminder that we are in the midst of the week of service, so we hope that you can enjoy these next few days in finding ways to give back to our local communities as we get ready to celebrate our Founders Day in just a few short days. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a fantastic rest of your evening.
Take care, everyone.